Well, welcome Josh Robinson, Signature Performance Revenue Cycle Executive, but also founder and disruptor. It's great to have you in this conversation because we definitely need founders and disruptors to be making progress in revenue cycle today.
Thank you.
I know one of the things we want to focus on in this conversation is credit balance and just handling it. I know that a lot of folks regard it as an annoyance, but you've actually taken intentful focus on credit balance because you've identified it as a critical area of opportunity. Can you
Oh
tell
yeah.
me about why and how?
I'm a glutton for punishment. So no, I love credit balances. Part of it is maybe the forensics of it. I
Sure.
love the interesting story of how we got to this on just not just a particular account, but then the whole mess in general.
Yeah.
With payers overpaying, underpaying, offsetting, retracting, with EMRs posting the wrong anticipated reimbursement, and then what were the facts?
Yeah.
What's the source of truth? How do we solve these? It was just such a complex problem,
Yeah.
and I've been in revenue cycle literally since I was a teenager. My parents had a medical billing business, and
Okay.
I started billing at 12 years old. I wanted to buy a go kart.
Uh huh.
I did. I bought that go kart. By the time I was 16, I had a Vanilla Ice style Mustang GT with T tops. So it wasn't like Vanilla
5.0.
Ice. It's 5.0. You know it. And then an old lifted Bronco,
Uh huh.
which, man, if I would have kept both of those cars today.
Oh, man.
But, anyways, I digress. So, I've always had we worked directly with healthcare providers
Yeah.
growing up. I
Yeah.
mean, our doctors were family that we worked with, and many of them still work with the business
Yeah.
to this day, 30 years later. And so I kind of developed a passion. I would see these healthcare providers labor so much,
Yeah.
and we made more money than them doing their billing.
Yep.
And they were slapped with, this was when we were changing to EDI coding, and this is the 90s into the 2000s, and they were just slapped with such an administrative burden.
Yeah.
And it's the future now. That administrative burden should get lighter, and it hasn't.
Definitely not.
Definitely hasn't. Technology should have improved it a long time ago, and it hasn't. So I love just the forensics of it, which is kind of what got me passionate about it in the first place.
So you've started in your own history, but like I know that you and I have talked before. You've given me like the breakdown of the how we got here,
Yeah.
if you can share that with us in this conversation.
So how we got here as an industry
Mm-hmm.
um, is, I think, if we go back to before the Affordable Care Act, credit balances were a nuisance,
Yeah.
but not necessarily a risk or something that required a lot of effort at the provider's level. Why they were a nuisance is they were complex. They took some of the best people to accurately do
Sure.
and resolve. I think commercial payers didn't necessarily struggle. They struggled with them, but they didn't struggle with them before the Affordable Care Act as much, because offsets and retractions, they would set up.
Yeah.
They had service providers and vendors that would come in and assist commercial payers with recovery.
Yeah.
And so did the federal government. But the Affordable Care Act kind of changed the landscape by introducing a credit balance penalty, the 60-day rule.
Yeah.
So the 60-day rule mandated that payers or that providers send money back to payers, government payers, in a timely fashion, preferably within 60 days is the rule. If not, they faced fines and penalties.
Yeah.
And that fine and penalty, if you didn't know, it's $10,000 per day per credit balance. And so fast forward a little further, and laws in this country, if you didn't know that, laws are made by politicians, and then they're supported, validated, made stronger with case law. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So case law then and further litigation, government proceedings validated that they were False Claims Act violations as well. So that's when,
I mean, False Claims Act goes back way, way back.
it does. I've got a fun fact if you want to hear about that.
Please.
So False Claims Act goes all the way back 1800s to I believe the Civil War,
Okay.
when the federal government would buy a wagon full of cannonballs, right?
Okay.
And they would buy it by the ton. So I'm going to buy 2 tons of cannonballs. Well, of course, unscrupulous or normal business people, would line the bottom of their wagons with lead, mud, clay, whatever, to increase the weight so that they were selling fewer cannonballs. And so the federal government was like, well, this is bad for us.
Mhm.
And they created the False Claims Act saying, hey, if you send us something that we didn't pay for, it's a failure to give the government what it expected or reimburse them if you don't.
Yeah.
And it was never geared towards healthcare. And today it is almost exclusively used to regulate healthcare and a very little bit the defense industry and a few other places. But it's been perverted to, let's say, manipulated
Yeah.
to control
Inappropriately applied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should create better mechanisms, but that's what the False Claims Act does. So the False Claims Act adds a whole nother level
Yeah.
of fines, penalties, imprisonment, etc.
Okay. You know what I find so ironic about that is that the root of that is in, as you mentioned, Civil War, and we're talking about cannonballs. And here, in the modern day, it has been described, revenue cycle is a battleground or an arms race or that type of thing. And to have that law applied in that way in this context is ironic. Just a quick question and maybe more of a recommendation. What you just talked about, where like arcane things get applied over time and changed, expanded, ballooned, and whatever. There's a fascinating podcast called More Perfect. Are you familiar with it? It's mostly focused on the Supreme Court, but it talks about exactly how laws like that develop in that way and just get bastardized. And I mean, the original intent of these laws, clearly with the False Claims Act, the original intent, very different than how it's being applied today. But I want to actually pull the thread on that a little bit, because there is so much dialogue about the modern context of revenue cycle being an arms race. I'm sure people think that's exactly correct. People think that's incorrect.
I've heard it described that way on more than one occasion.
Sure.
Where I heard that described was more from the venture capital, private equity, the investment side. I spent the last year having many private equity VC conversations with my company.
Yeah.
And they would say, "Hey, Josh, we're interested in your product. We're interested in what you're doing because we want to beat this organization to market."
Yeah.
And some of those conversations were tough because I didn't care who they wanted to beat in this arms race. My ask to them would be like, "Look, I have a personal mission to eliminate the billions of dollars in waste associated with this problem. And, there are patients not getting their cash, and health systems are operating on negative margins. What are we going to do to solve that problem? Not to increase this value so you can spin it up and sell it to another organization," which there's nothing wrong with that. I love capitalism, just, as much as the next guy. But when you're not speaking to me as in how do I fulfill your mission? How do I get you further along? It doesn't resonate.
Yeah.
So I heard it in that context as an arms race. And my retort was always, well, how can we solve this problem? And why are you the best partner to solve it? And take this forward versus anybody else.
Yeah. Can you show me that we're advancing the collective mission of healthcare versus just, finding an opportunity from a profit standpoint? Yeah.
When I worked for United Health Group, I had a conversation with one of my leaders where it was a group setting, and the question was asked, hey, I'm new to this organization. I'm a very high up leader.
Yeah.
What can I do to make the organization better? And many of the executives were not interested in answering that question for various reasons, either fear of, feedback, which I love feedback, or who knows what.
Like internal competition.
Exactly. Internal competition, whatnot. And so I'm like the idiot that is like, oh, I've got an idea. How about, our mission is to heal this healthcare system and help people live healthier lives. And I'm watching over my last 5 years here, things get more complex and, denials increase. And I'm watching us kind of fail at this mission. So to me, to solve this mission, we should, do this and
Yeah.
this. I talked about specific things that were maybe a little beyond a little controversial
Disruptive.
in the organization, disruptive.
Sure.
Yeah. And the feedback I got the next day from my leader was like, "Hey, Josh, people love you. Your team follows you. Your division performs highly because you preach that mission bullshit." That's the feedback that I got. But when you're in this room, and we don't have to use this obviously, but when you're in this room and you say those things, you just look like an asshole.
Yeah. Do you know what we were saying just now? It actually, what comes up for me is a quote actually from Sarah Armstrong. She talks about,
I know her.
indeed, you have to be responsible for your own 20 square feet, right?
Mhm.
Like, the mentality you're talking about is exactly that mentality versus, well, we have to wait until the big players figure out how to solve this problem. Every organization is just a collection of people, and if more people can work from the mentality you were working from, because you were thinking about what do I have control over,
Mhm.
how can I make a difference within the sphere of my influence. I really feel like that is how we're actually
Yeah.
going to get there. I would be super curious to hear from you. How the heck do you foster that within these organizations and even within the individual?
Yeah. Well, culture is everything at an organization. Your culture, you can have the best product, service, anything, right? But a terrible culture will chew it up and spit it out
Yeah,
and destroy it.
That what you were just saying, it sounds like a terrible culture.
Exactly. And um, you can rally yourself behind a mission.
Yeah.
And you can rally others behind the mission.
Yeah.
But if that mission isn't, all the way up to the highest echelon,
Yes.
It'll ultimately fail.
Yeah.
I worked at USAA for 11 years. If anybody's a USAA member, it's one of the best organizations on the planet. I'm still a member to this day, love the company. And, every conference room, every building, we had, we know what it means to serve. We had our mission, to facilitate the financial security of the military community. So if I wanted to do something and it was against policy or it was not in a document or
Yeah.
whatever, if I could answer how it made, Lieutenant Colonel so-and-so or Sergeant so-and-so's life better or, facilitate our mission,
Yeah.
the answer would be yes. And we would answer to the whatever, banking department, or we'd answer to the insurance commissioner later and be able to validate what we did based off of our mission.
Fantastic.
And there are few organizations like that.
Yes,
I'm
that's
very
true.
fortunate at Signature Performance. We also have that. That's what drove me there. The culture
Yeah.
where I am now is same thing. How can we rally behind this mission that
Yeah.
we have of improving the financial health and well-being of
Yeah.
our business partners that we work with, and kind of tear down the silos and get into what needs to be done and do it however we have to.
Yeah.
So like I'm empowered to bring other players to the table. The question is never, could they compete with Signature? And if so, what's our risk of having this conversation?
Sure.
The first thing is like, well, you like them, you trust them,
Is their
Great.
mission aligned?
let's do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Let's have that conversation. And then, if NDAs need to fly, it's a later thing. It is
Yeah.
not we'll sign this and
Right.
then we'll schedule the call. And so going back to your original question, it's that culture needs to be one of collaboration, needs to be one of high performance, needs to be one of actually rallying around a mission and everybody working to achieve that mission. And it's scalable. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it can be 100 multiple, it could be millions of people.
Yeah.
Our armed forces, a few million strong, and they rally behind the same mission. So it's scalable, it's doable. It's just very rare.
It is. Command and control seems to be kind of the predominant
Yeah.
mode in healthcare and healthcare organizations. But what you're talking about, when purpose serves as a genuine North Star, it's so empowering to the organization. Individuals know how to make decisions rather than, I have to, I've got to go through 7 lines of red tape to figure out if I can even do this.
Mhm.
Is it the best way to achieve the mission becomes how decisions are reached?
Yeah.
I love that.
It's like you go to Starbucks and your barista is empowered to change your order,
Mhm.
give it to you for free,
Yeah.
put a silly name on it, anything,
Yeah.
right? Because they've given that authority to the barista, and that's that speaks to their success,
Yeah.
versus you go to we've all been to other brands, we've
Mhm.
been to fast food places where it's like, well, I don't want onion rings on this. And it's like, well, it comes with onion rings.
Right.
So I'll put them on the side or you can take them off. And it's like, what's the point of that? Or the Fountain Blue up here since we're in Vegas, let's talk about this. Fountain Blue took 19 years or whatever to build on the north end of the
Oh,
strip.
sure. Yeah.
Fountain Blue. So opening day, they had nachos, right? 20 some odd dollar nachos. And the nachos had, something like 6 chips, just your round corn chips,
Yep.
with like cheese and toppings on each of them. And that was it.
Oh,
And they got roasted. And of course, somebody came and was like, wait, these are my nachos? No, you can't get more nachos. These are your nachos. Right after that kind of went viral, you see their nachos now, and it's a giant
Yeah.
platter for like $5 less, because they're like, I don't know the realities on that, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
If that person was able to just say, yeah, you're right, these nachos are terrible, let me go back and make them if I have to, it wouldn't have been this big brand damaging
Okay.
thing.
I'm totally with you. So in a second, I want to get to actually some particular like concrete strategies specifically around credit balance. But before we do, I just want to continue on this thread for one more second, which is there is in healthcare, it's not nachos, it's health, it's lives, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I can understand why command and control is attractive, right? And that kind of autonomy of empowerment under a mission-driven context, it can be scary, right?
Mhm.
When you're in a healthcare situation and there is that much at risk, how do you reconcile that?
I think that everybody needs to actually understand the gravity of what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm not just paying this claim. I'm not just rebutting this denial. I'm not just
It's not nachos.
Right, it's not nachos.
Yeah.
I'm not just resolving a credit balance. That credit balance that I resolve has a patient refund component. That patient refund gives somebody cash, whether it's $25 or $2,000, to go do something
Yeah.
with.
Right.
And when people don't see the gravity of what they're doing, and it is just, oh, I've got this widget to build today.
Right.
I don't care that this widget is an integral component to a pacemaker in that person.
Right.
Life depends on me building it right. You're going to have quality defects. You're going to have problems. But if that person is like, if this is perfect, the rest of the machine will be perfect. And somebody's grandma, grandpa, dad, sister, brother is going to live longer
Yeah.
because of my effort here. And it's true. On the financial
Yeah.
side, it's exactly the same gravity.
Yeah.
And people just don't connect the dots on how important what we do on the finance side of healthcare is.
I really appreciate how you were able to put those two things together just now. I'm being very genuine. I want to say I hope very much that more people as capable and open-minded as you will populate roles. The fact that you find credit balance and revenue cycle a fascinating, intriguing puzzle, and that's where you want to put your mind to, we just need more of that because we just need it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
now
thank you.
on the particulars of the puzzle solving, right? I mean, you have been addressing credit balance for a long time, and you have been steeped in since before you graduated this space. If we can, because one of the things we really strive for in this series is to get into concrete tactics, best practices, executables, and credit balance is an area of struggle. Is there guidance in the context of just this conversation that you can offer to the health system leaders that are listening?
Yeah. Don't ignore them. Start working on credits, whether it's just a understanding of what the problem is, or not the problem. What is the scope of my credit balances? Ask yourself that question.
Yep.
Compare that scope of credits to your daily AR. Okay, so say, okay, I've amassed all of these credit balances,
Yep.
And it turns out it's 6 or 7 days in AR. Well, HFMA MAP says, well, it should be half a day in AR. So you've got kind of a best practice there. You can start and say, okay, we've got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this large amount of credits. get an inventory. I had a really good friend of mine call me and say, I've got 49,000 credit balances, and it's for tons and tons of cash.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, let me give me a BAA and let me take a look at that credit balance report. Well, it turns out it was 40 some odd thousand encounters over fewer than 3,000
Sure.
accounts.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and the way that EMRs post sometimes it can look inflated. Certain ones
That was
out
so
there
gentle just now. the way
worse
you
than
said that.
others. Yeah, thank you. And so understand what is the scope of your problem first off. It's kind of the whole admit you have a problem.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm Josh, and I'm a credit balanceaholic. Admit that you have the problem. Get that inventory, and then from there, take that inventory of credits
Yeah.
and start to apply some sort of logic.
Yeah.
You can do it yourself. You can start building spreadsheets. You can start, by simple calculations like, is the sum of my last payment greater than the total bill charges?
Yeah.
You can start to apply some logic that you don't need too much help with.
Okay. My instinct right now is someone's yelling at the screen, Josh, this sounds great, but I have revenue to collect and my margin is like this right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it takes your best people. So if you put on interns, which I'm guilty of doing that in the past, and it's not really guilty, it was a good experience, but you put on some folks who don't have just the deep knowledge base, you will over refund. It's very easy, especially when getting a retraction or offset request. It's very easy to follow the logic that maybe a payer says got you there.
Sure.
Versus going through your own mastications, rebuilding the account, and understanding what you think caused this credit balance, and then compare that to those offset requests or the refund requests that you receive. When you can do that, you're a highly skilled person. Now, that highly skilled person is absolutely better used in many folks' opinions on collecting cash.
Sure.
So that's when you have to ask yourself, do I tag a partner? Do I hire labor for this directly? Right. Do I hire offshore labor? Is very popular, and there are pros and cons, and I've got very strong opinions on them, which I'm happy to share offline, of course. But what do I do? But if you're going to take those really amazing resources that you have, and if you're a revenue cycle director listening to this, there's somebody in your mind right now. For me, it was my Carolyn that I had. Is Carolyn, she's the person. If I'm going to use her skill set and knowledge, I know it's going to cost me a lot. So then the thought is the benefit of focusing, my Carolyn on this better than collecting cash? And in many cases, it is, but it's counterintuitive because Carolyn is going to absorb a bunch of revenue or cash, or at least mark it up as, hey, now it's not ambiguous. We know that this is not an overpayment, or we know based on the circumstances of it, we can keep it, etc. So the trade-off is there. It's just, it hurts to make that trade-off, especially when the rest of your revenue cycle team is telling you, we're spending money to send money back.
Sure, and staffing is a problem, etc.
Exactly. And so it's a challenge. And of course, my argument has always been, get an expert and work with them.
Well, then this is a great segue. I mean, it should be pretty obvious at this point just how your services can impact an organization. But let's dig in more on Signature specifically, right? So what do I look for as a revenue cycle leader to know that I'm in a position where contacting you is exactly my next step?
So, I guess your initial opinion. So take a look at me. Take a look at my product offerings. Take a look at the website. Those are some things that will make you think, oh, this is a person I want to connect with, or a service, or a company. But I say trust your gut, but I'm a highly intuitive person, so doesn't work for everybody. But take a look at a potential partner. I think you definitely have to partner in this space in credit balances. I think that it is not a best practice to go it alone. So what you're looking for is do I bring the payer to the table? Some providers like that. So my friends at Trend bring the payer to the table,
Yeah, sure.
and they advocate. And I'm not trying to plug Trend or anybody right now. But what I love, and especially what Sarah has done with Trend, is change that narrative from, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to be free, we're going to clean some stuff up, and then we're going to peace out. And, you don't have to worry about the economics of it.
Yep.
It's, hey, there's friction here. There's a difficult dynamic,
Yeah.
and we're here to improve that dynamic, which is what needs to happen in the space. So if you're a revenue cycle executive and you want to, at a health system, and you want to solve this problem, you want to look at the options out there. So again, to try and get back to answering your question,
Yeah.
who can do this? What kind of staff do I have?
Right.
What's their skill set? We
Yep.
already talked about that. Who can help me with that? Do they bring the payer to the table, and do I want them to bring the payer to the table? Some don't.
It's core philosophy.
Right,
Yeah.
philosophy. They don't want the payer involved. What are the state statutes? What are my obligations?
Yeah.
What's my contractual obligation? What are the laws here? Does this partner that I'm looking at, do they bring anything special? Do they bring something more than people? Do they
Yeah.
bring technology, reporting, insights, root cause analysis?
Yeah.
Can they actually progress the problem solving piece of this? And then interview. I mean, talk to everybody, and make a decision.
I know it can be, uncomfortable to sing one's own praises, but one thing that I really appreciate about Signature's approach is your neutrality and flexibility, right?
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that ties back to how mission driven an individual you are, right? It's not about, I have to make sure that if there's an opportunity, that it's an opportunity for Signature. It has always been, as I've heard from you, it's always been, well, what is the best outcome for the client, and how do I arrange that? And you're deeply networked in the whole space, and you're always pointing to what you believe will produce the best outcome. And I really appreciate that about your approach.
Well, I appreciate that, and I love that Signature Performance gives me the flexibility. They trust me enough to do that.
Yeah.
And so our approach with credit balances, we've been doing them for 20 years.
Yeah.
We are one of 6 vendors that handles a vast majority of the VA's needs.
Sure.
And we're damn good at what we do.
Right on.
Look at us on Class, and we are. Class just said a few weeks ago, I was, in that meeting, that we are the best kept secret in healthcare. And so,
great and terrible news.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. And it fits with our culture. We're Omaha based, Midwest. We're kind of sweet. It's not like their grandmas in Omaha don't go and talk about that they make the best pies. They say, oh, I'm sure, somebody else's grandma down the street is just as good, and it might not be true. And that's one thing that I love about the company in many ways, but that needs to change to be genuine as well. And so the organization that I work with, Signature gives me that freedom to connect with others. And so in the credit balance space specifically, my goal was to move away from it genuinely. I said, I've been doing this for 10 years. Just credit balances.
Yeah.
I can bring so much more to the table. Believe it or not, I have patents to my name at other places. I've done some really interesting stuff, and I want to innovate more. And Signature is giving me that ability in other pieces of the revenue cycle. But we kind of got sucked back into credit balances because my expertise, and people came to me and said, help, we need a solution. And that's where I say, great, here are the players in the space.
Yep.
All of them.
Yep.
Here are all the opportunities. Here's everybody. I have a competitive matrix. I know what people are good at. I know. If you want to solve this problem, you need to talk to my friends at Crown.
Yep.
You need to talk to my friends at Trend. And then we're here to help augment your staff. We're here to guide you with consulting. We're here for reporting. We can do anything else that you need. But it takes a village.
And that is a legitimate advocate for the health of American healthcare. I really appreciate it. Let me close with a final question. Let's call it a 5-year time horizon, and then a 1 out of 10 optimism question for you. How optimistic are you feeling about revenue cycle specifically?
See, I'm stupid optimistic. I
Okay.
always am. Like it's probably a downfall. I think 10. I think that I'm excited in this 1 to 5 years, 10-year time frame, to get some fresh blood
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah.
You know, I've got 4 kids, and I've tried to get each and every one of them interested in healthcare, and to no avail. My oldest daughter famously told me, she's like, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to be a hard hitting investigative journalist. And she will be. I'm very impressed with her.
Yeah.
However, if that doesn't work, whatever it is you do, Dad, I'll probably go do that.
Okay.
It's like, well, thanks, maybe. And my son, my youngest, the 7-year-old, is going to be a boxer
Okay.
and a firefighter. And then he's also going to work for Dad. So it's like,
I
hey,
would say
works
that,
for me.
that I think that there is a fulfillment has a magnetism of its own, right?
Mhm.
That your kids can identify your sense of fulfillment in the role that you're holding and the work that you're doing, I'm sure is very attractive to them.
Yeah, I think so. I think 10 years down the road, what we need is we need to attract more talent
Yeah.
to this.
Yeah.
We need to make revenue cycle its own skill, like
Yes.
pilot or plumber, technician.
Yeah.
Um, since we're at this conference, I've got friends at Boise State here. They have a revenue cycle focus
Oh yeah.
education, and we need more of that because how many trillions of dollars is this industry now? 20 trillion or something. It's the biggest driver of GDP. It's the biggest saver of lives and also the biggest taker
Sure.
of lives.
Yeah.
And we're doing nothing to advance it with the younger generation. So I see kids. I can't believe I'm saying that out at these conferences and whatnot. And I want to introduce myself and I want to praise them
Yeah.
for being here and say this is an amazing industry. You change lives.
Have you ever thought about doing like adjunct professor work or guest speaking at the university that you were talking about?
So my friend is an adjunct professor,
Mhm.
Joe Lenhart, actually, and he loves it. And I've thought about talking to him and thinking about it, but then time constraints.
And I
all
would
of
tell
that.
you, I think you would find it enormously rewarding to do that.
I'm a terrible grader. Everyone would get just A's.
Okay. Right on.
But
Though increasingly, I have still found it difficult to find inspiring moments in this industry. I would call this one of them.
oh, good.
And I thank you for this conversation.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Right on.